الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم واجعلنا منهم آمين. Alhamdulillah that we are gathered tonight when Syria is a different Syria, and it's all by the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah have given the zalim a time, and when the time came, he took him in a way that way beyond what many of us, if not all of us, have thought is possible. So the event by itself is an earthquake in the area, no doubt, and in Syria specifically. 4 days before last Sunday, we were giving the usual talk in the masjid here, and I said all indication is that the number of days for Bashar are limited. Why? I mean, I base it on the indication, but I did not believe what I said, because it did not come to me that, in a few days Bashar will be gone. I mean, that was not something that I myself could comprehend. All what I said is all the indication that his days are numbered, but I did not believe it. Saturday evening was, in fact, a joyous moment for this ummah at large, not just the people of Syria. There's no doubt that the people of Syria and the people of Lebanon and the people of Palestine who took bulk of the harm and the torture in Lebanon and Syria from the Assad family were the most joyous. But the whole ummah, really, because it reflects this ummah is one ummah and the joy of the ummah. I'm joined, inshallah, this evening by Sheikh Nizar Mish'al, who's known here. He came here before. MashaAllah, he's our expert on the Shafi'i madhab and beyond. He's from Syria, come from a prominent family of scholars. And we are also joined on the phone by a brother who many of you know, Professor Khudr Zarour from Lebanon. He's a professor of political science at NC State. And last night he called me and said, I have COVID. And if it was really, if Bashar was still there, I would say this is an Assad family conspiracy. They did it. They made Khudr to have COVID. This is how far we used to think that those people are criminals and their hands can extend, alhamdulillah, that they are refugees. So we start with Sheikh Nizar. Can you, inshallah, shed some light on your own feeling, your families, and at large on the people in Syria and in the Mahjar on what took place?
Jazakumullah khairan. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First, I would like to thank you again for having me in this community that's dear to my heart. What was my feeling? What was our feeling? The people who were expelled from Syria at one point. It is that we seized back, we have taken back our stolen home. The home of our grandfathers and fathers that was stolen in 1963. So basically, you just take it at par value. You have your grandfather's house, and they came in 1963, started bothering you, trying to attack you, trying to change you, change who you are, change your beliefs, trying to take your rights, impose limits on you, push you away until they were able to take it. And then they prohibited you not from just taking your house back, but even from coming close to it. You would be afraid from speaking about it. People would be afraid of speaking to you because you are someone who's not favored by the regime. So this is basically what the situation was, and like in a sudden, everything has changed, and this dictatorship, this طاغية, and his gang, the عصابات, that like the شرذمة, is all it all like vanished. Yes, it wasn't one moment. It was a long, long road that the Syrian people were taking. Syria, believe it or not, after the French colonization has left Syria, Syria was a democracy. We used to have a parliament, and we used to have free speech. We used to have even the Sharia scholar used to participate in the parliament, used to stand for the people, and it was the people. Then there was a series of military coups that ended up in 1963 when the Ba'ath Party came to take place with a leadership that composed of a cult of three minorities that live in Syria that were able to achieve or to take the opportunity to capitalize on all the support that they have taken and all the facilities they have had from the French, and now they have taken the whole country. The French, when they were in Syria, they established the army with mainly three minorities. If you are a colonization, like power, a foreign power, it's really hard to use the majority to support, like to depend on and to to create agent amongst them. So it's easier for them to get through some minorities. So the three minorities, Nusayris, Ismailis, and Durzis, they were able to convince like some groups of these people, and they established the army, and this army was developed later on to be the army of Syria, and they continued building their capacities in that army until they had their victory in 1963. And from day one, they started attacking the people, the majority, in their religion, in their freedom, in their rights. Started destroying the civil society until they turned the civil society to be, they cracked it into shattered pieces. And it went on. Syrians did expect that they are working to gain it, but they were not able to avoid it at that time. They stood against it in 1963, 1964, 1967, 1973, back again, until then. It's not a history chapter, so I can go over like each incident that happens in these years until it again, like some accident has started happening in 1967 that and the people rise until the 1967, and it ended in 1982 with the Hamas massacre, with the Hama massacre, Majzarat Hama. Then again, the people were kind of under the ash for a long period that we did not expect it to come again in 2011. So this 2011 was kind of a light that was coming out of the darkness, that there is a hope that we might take our country back, that this Assad, this Ba'ath, these people that are ruling our countries, the countries that used to be a prosperous countries, they might be gone. However, we were, the people were able to defeat Assad, to defeat all the militias that were coming with him until Russia came with its air forces and flipped the equation. So we lost hope again. However, there was those people who did not lose hope, who stayed in northern Syria. They worked on building their capacities. They worked on unifying themselves. They got some training, and even, it's like for any people, if they are oppressed, oppression would create an environment for different types of thoughts, extremism, and all of that. So they also worked on training people to not go into extremism, correcting ideas, spreading right knowledge. They had a civil society that was developing in northern Syria. And with things that they have been planning for at least 2 years and about 4 years, you can say, they started the operation they called Rad'u al-Udwan. This Rad'u al-Udwan was initially planned to seize Aleppo, only Aleppo. However, with the circumstances that the Syrian army was surprised by this attack, they withdrawn from Aleppo, then your resources and all these, like your aspirations and everything, okay, I did not, my strength is still the same. I was able to get Aleppo, and that's the situation of the Syrian army. So they went on and continued to Hama, where they had some resistance for about 3 days. Then maybe the most important battles have taken place in Homs. They were getting defeated in Homs, and at that point, they started surrounding Damascus. Of course, from when they have reached to Homs, Dar'a was kind of like the people were getting rid of the Assad agents in their checkpoints and everything. Damascus suburbs, they were doing the same thing. But with the defeat in Homs, some officials, like security officials, army officials, started cooperating with the leadership there and surrounding Damascus. Then Assad fled the country and left. So this is in brief what has taken place. And
there are two issues, inshallah. I'm going to ask Professor Khudr, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure you quickly, raise your degree in Jannah, and forgive your sins for the corona. Two issues, you can take either one, and I will take the other, inshallah. Some people are wondering, why did the Assad regime collapse so quickly? The other side of the coin is, how did it last those 54 years with this oppression? So inshallah, take either one and I'll take the other.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry I could not be with you in person, but I'm doing my best to recover. I'm fatigued, but alhamdulillah, I will recover, inshallah. I do want to talk about the second part of the question. Since I grew up in North Lebanon, Tripoli specifically, every day we wake up and we see those two famous chairs where Hafiz al-Assad would sit, and next to him another person, interesting person. I'm used to those chairs, and when those chairs, you don't see them anymore, where Bashar used to sit or Hafiz used to sit, it's puzzling, it's mind-boggling that that's no longer the case. What happened? They basically both leaders have evaporated and disappeared politically. Why, the question is really why the regime has collapsed, but I will take the second part. Why did the regime lasted so long? Well, a lot of issues that has happened. I mean, they have fought and occupied Lebanon. They have destroyed Tal al-Za'atar in Beirut. Tal al-Za'atar will not have been penetrated are occupied by the Phalange Party or the Christian Phalange Party in Lebanon or the Israelis without the Syrian army's help. 52 invasions of Tal al-Za'atar in Beirut in less than a month. That's what the power was spent, or the military weaponry that Syria had, the most advanced weapons, to destroy the Palestinian resistance and the Lebanese resistance. Even with all these fightings on all fronts, Syria was able to continue, or the Assad regime continued to function. They could not have functioned without the support of outsiders. I do want to go back just historically a little bit to 1910, 1920, just at the end of the First World War. They understand, the Western Europeans, Western powers understand how important Sham is. And Sham, I'm going to lump together Jordan, Syria, Palestine, of course, and Lebanon as Bilad al-Sham. This is the heart of the Ummah. This is very, very important, very critical real estate. It has always been an open real estate, but psychologically, the Western powers, I'm talking about France and England specifically, they decided to break up Iraq, Syria, all these countries, and they want to destroy the tribes in the eastern part of Syria, that is Zur, Hasaka, and western part of Iraq. Those tribes are the same clan and the same tribe. If the tribes have been unified, the British and the French reasoned, if they become unified, they will unify Sham. And that was not acceptable to the British by 1920. They gave Iraq independence in exchange for letting part of western Iraq become part of Syria, breaking up the clan. The French, on the other hand, to weaken Syria further, they encouraged Lebanese nationalism to have, of course, break up or breakaway region in western Syria. It became, Lebanon, not only the mountain of Lebanon, but greater Lebanon, from Bab Fatima, which is close to the Palestinian border, all the way to Akkar in the north, close to Kardaha, or Tartus, if you will. So the grand design by the French, as they learned from the British, that we need to break down society, the political and social infrastructure in Syria, based on lineage, based on mazahib, based on tawa'if, and they have accomplished that. The French especially were looking for the Druze, and the Druze kind of neglected them a little bit. They want to be unified in their own state. And the Alawiyin, or Alawite community looked to the French for support. So they received the promise, the Alawite family, especially Al-Assad family, a grandfather of Bashar, promised that a leadership position in exchange for loyalty to the French colonial rule. So this was well-established colonial power influencing local domestic policies in Sham, whether in Syria or Lebanon, and the British, of course, colonized Jordan and, of course, Palestine. And the two were playing, against the other to keep the Ummah off balance. And as we know, Rasulullah discussed several times in several hadith how important Sham is. If Sham is unified, the Ummah will have a good chance of being unified. So Al-Assad regime received the following: received international support publicly, received behind the table or under the table support from the Israelis. They worked hand in hand to divide Lebanon, to destroy the Palestinian resistance, the PLO, minimize all challenges to Syrian rule, with exchanging of information and intelligence between the Syrian regime and the Mossad regime. The French were also on board in collaborating, trying to make sure Bashar al-Assad, Hafiz al-Assad remain in power. Until now, we have different players in the game. Russia, for the first time, is on the grounds, losing that, a foothold in Syria. The U.S. now is the big player, and of course, the Israelis basically have controlled more Syrian land now without firing a shot than they did in all these wars. It's a collaboration among the powers to divide Syria. Now, the question is, why are we talking about Syria? I want to talk about Sudan. We're not talking about Western Sahara. We're not talking about Mali. Because Syria, again, as I said earlier, is the heart of the Ummah. And the political culture, the religious culture, the religious faith of the Ummah is based in Syria. Greater Syria, collectively speaking. So the core issue here is, how can we sustain Syria and kind of reunify the Ummah? Now, all my life, my family will tell me, my parents will always told me that The Ummah has one real estate, it's one parcel. We do not recognize borders drawn by foreign invaders. And I hold true to that concept. So I don't believe those artificial geographies that have been developed and forced upon us by the West. But this is the great psychological warfare we have been undergone, being oppressed by for all my life. I'm almost 50, and that's all I know is that division not only between countries, also between families and between tribes and regions and even towns and villages. So if you're from that village, you belong to that leader. If you speak English, you are pro England, and so forth and so on. So the reason why Al-Assad family stayed in power, number one, political support. Second, the international community protected them. They committed genocide in Hamas back in 1982. I heard about it. When I was a child in Tripoli, they fired missiles from Damascus or Syria into Tripoli. And they have created massacres. They used to throw people from the buildings that I have seen. If they could not find, let's say, Mr. Qudr, they will take my kids, my mom, and they will throw them off the rooftop. And one person told me from the Syrian army, I was like 6, and he said, yes, we are worse than the Israeli army. So this is the type of brutality. If you stop at a checkpoint in Lebanon, and you have a beautiful fiance or beautiful car, they have the right at gunpoint to confiscate your car, your wife, your money, and you cannot say anything. So we have endured 29 years of brutal occupation, and the Syrian regime under Hafiz and Bashar claimed for 30-some years that they were invited as guests into Lebanon, and that's not true. We are happy and excited that they are gone, but the question is, what is next? Thank you very much. I'm over for any questions. جزاكم الله خير.
جزاك الله خير وبارك الله فيك. Let me just say quickly about Lebanon before we talk about why the army basically collapsed and Bashar fled. What Dr. Khudr is referring to is when the Palestinian resistance moved from Jordan to Lebanon with their arms, the Maronite Christians suspected that trouble is ahead. Because when France separated Lebanon from Syria and established this entity that's called Lebanon, a small country, Western oriented, in the heart of the Muslim world, basically at that stage, Lebanon became a place of conspiracies against Syria. And that was well known in that period of time. But when the Palestinian resistance came, the Maronites, who had the political power, the military power, the economic power in Lebanon, although they were minority, they feared that Palestinians, who are Sunni Arabs, although it's a secular movement, they will align themselves with the Muslims in Lebanon. And indeed, this is what took place. So Amal, for example, the Shiite movement, started when the Palestinian PLO start training them on arms. There was Musa Sadr, one of the Ayatollahs of the Shiite, who established this through the help of the Palestinians in Lebanon. Similarly, the Palestinians start arming and training the Sunni Muslims, not just the Shiite Muslims. And at that point, there was the major political figure in Lebanon, Kamal Jumblat. He was the major figure at the time, Druze. But he was a thinker, a politician of the first class. His son is Walid, the drunken guy who's there. He has just inherited this position. So when the war started, the civil war, after the Maronites attacked a bus full of Palestinians, trying to finish the Palestinians' presence in Lebanon, the Shiite, the Sunnis, the Druze get together and beat the Maronites very badly. I mean, they finished. Their influence in Lebanon came to an end, except that the U.S. gave Hafid al-Assad the command to enter Syria and flip the coin. So Hafid al-Assad, tens of thousands of Syrian soldiers enter Lebanon, fought the Lebanese Sunnis, the Lebanese Shiites, the Palestinians, and killed many of them. And the Sheikh described Tell al-Za'tar. You just need to Google Tell al-Za'tar and you see what he was talking about. And for all those years that, Professor Khadr mentioned, Syria really enslaved Lebanon. I'm talking about the government and the Alawis, that culminated in assassination of Kemal Jumblat, and then eventually the assassination of the Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri under Bashar. Now, why did the army collapse in a way that nobody have expected? I will give you a simple example from the CNN. CNN had an interview with a soldier who they met in Damascus. And he said, I was stationed near Hama. We were 10 soldiers. And of course, someone is in charge of the 10. He said, however, the 10 of us were not there. Only 3 of us. Because the other ones have bought with money, bought their position with money, meaning the Alawi guy told them, you do not need to come to your position, just pay me money each month. So he said, we ended up 3 of us. He said, when we hear that the armed groups are coming, we just threw our arms and we fled. He said, I fled from Hama toward Damascus, asking Allah and making salah and dua that those armed resistance, those opposition will be victorious. This is just a small example. When they asked him about the support, he said, we used to have 1 meal a day, and it is made of burghul. If you know the burghul, what's the word for burghul in English? It's some kind of wheat, but it's little, whatever. You guys know more than myself. So basically, this is not even bread. He said, this is the meal that we get per day, and he said, it does not satisfy our hunger. But he said, that's all we used to get. So basically, the bulk of the army has been Sunni Muslims. And before the events of 2011, there were 325,000 army members in Syria. After the events in Syria, it ended up an army of 75,000, because the army basically then split, and the bulk of it revolted against the government and joined the rebellion against Bashar. So at this point, all the army who are on the ground are Sunni Muslims. The top leadership and the levels are Alawis, Nusayris, who are from the clan of Bashar al-Assad. What's really interesting is a meeting that took place between the Iranian Foreign Minister Iraqji and Bashar al-Assad, the second day of the events. And Bashar was telling Iraqji, I wonder why my army is not fighting. What? You wonder, why will the army fight for the $30 a month that they got? Will the army fight for the Alawis and for Bashar to stay in the power? Do they have aqidah to fight for a deen or for a land? Of course. They were just waiting to get rid of Bashar, just like the rest of the Ummah. And that's why the army disintegrated in this regard. There's no doubt, of course, that the plan, which is really had played the major role in it, the Turkish government have played the major role diplomatically initially, and put the framework for this. And Erdogan made it clear. Erdogan is not a simple politician. When Erdogan said, today Idlib and Hama and Halab, tomorrow Hama and Hims, and then Damascus. This is the third or the fourth day of the events. He knew what he was talking about. Inshallah, we're going to leave 20 minutes for question and answer and comments. But we have a question here. Today, there was a meeting between Sisi and top army officers and top mukhabarat intelligence officers and top police officers. And they said, we met to discuss Sudan and this and that and Syria. Of course, they discussed only Syria, but they would not say it. And he came afterwards saying, Egypt is solid, Egypt is intact, the people is, the country is strong, meaning what happened in Syria will not happen here. Question to both of our guests, can the success of the revolution cause other regimes to really collapse? Do we see this inspiration? What are your thoughts on this? We'll start with Professor Khudr on this regard.
Assalamu alaikum. Again, the great question. I think all regimes in the Middle East are susceptible to collapse as long as they receive international support, international backing from the great powers. The great powers are the ones that decide the game. The Ummah is too weak. We were hoping Egypt will interfere. Egypt has not interfered, witnessing a genocide on their own borders. So they are too weak to do anything without the help, support, and blessings of outsiders. So the regimes are weak, without the exception of maybe Algeria. But they all are weak. As long as they receive international support, they could succeed and push the regime to collapse. Without outside support, it's very difficult to do.
Jazakallah khair. For the sake of time, let me ask Sheikh Nizar another question in this regard. What are the challenges that are facing the new Syria?
Jazakallah khairan. Of course, it's just opening some boxes here. We cannot touch each challenge, but one of the challenges right now is that there has been some going on effort politically from like Al-Itilaf and the Security Council, the international communities. And they issued some resolution like 2254 and others. And right now they are trying to revive these resolutions and plans, frameworks, whatever you would like to call them, and put them for the Syrian people to follow. However, the circumstances has changed since then. Assad was there. When Assad was there, the game is different. So for now, like now when we come and the international community is trying to push forward the previous resolutions that which were useless and they could not impose during Assad and try to implement them on the Syrian people right now, this is really getting closer to a conspiracy. However, the Syrian people has to deal with that wisely, meaning that Syria is weak and destroyed. We know that like first of all, as Sheikh Hisham and explained, that the Syrian army has no greed and actually right now is dissolved, and also like all the equipments are really old. However, Israeli forces has destroyed everything left, although that is not it's so useless. So
You want to add something? Yeah, just let the brother Sheikh Nizar finish, inshallah.
عفوا سوري تمام. So right now the Syrian leadership has asked to reconsider the resolution It's not that for the Syrian people to accept the resolution as is, since they came when circumstances were different. So I hope that the Syrian people will stay unified with their current leadership until they get better resolution than what they have. The Syrian leadership right now has promised for a civil society. They have promised to establish an army and discontinue all these different fasa'il that were unified under the unified into this operation. So they are going to dissolve it all, create a Syrian army out of it. They are going to organize as some kind of government, some type of Majlis al-Shab and all of that. However, how is that? This is not determined yet, but the international community, with some of the people they have worked on, with some of the neighboring countries and some of the Gulf state countries, they are trying to impose what they have established during Assad existence that would not give the Sunni Arab their weight and majority, their needs, their community back. They wanted to fragment the society, basically. Yes, diversity is good in creating, in developing your thoughts and everything, but for execution, for transitional period, for all of these things, we need unity. And what the international community is bringing on the table is not unity. They are going to, again, try to establish, here are the Kurds quota, here is the women quota. I don't know how that plays in, but this is how they were thinking. This is the Druze, and this is the Nusayris that were named Alawites by the French. So this is one of the main challenges. Staying unified is the other challenge. On the ground, the challenge they are faced, they are not a lot different from the challenges they used to face in northern Syria. And they were successful in coping these. So if they continue doing the same thing with the support of Turkey and Qatar, I believe everything is workable, because Syrian people, Syrian civil society is kind of sustaining itself. It had sustained itself throughout this period. But it is about how the international community is trying to shape something that they accept. Of course, we cannot live by ourselves, but we need to find something that's acceptable for a unified Ummah or Syrian people. Thank you.
جزاك الله خير. أخونا خضر إذا سمحت كمل 2 minutes إن شاء الله.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. The major challenge is really, for me, I think, is the idea of belief in the nation state. Do Syrians still believe in their own country after a long, brutal civil war where the minority oppressed the majority? Could the minority feel safe, or they have to deport or be deported? Second challenge, I think, that no one is talking about is dual loyalty. Dual loyalty, you have 600,000 Syrian men and women in Lebanon who gave birth to children. Now they have dual identity. Or Lebanese men will marry a Syrian woman, and now they have a few kids. Now, how do they identify themselves? Are they Lebanese or Syrians? Because in Lebanon, it's creating a tension similar to when the PLO or the Palestinians after 1948 came to Lebanon. It tipped the balance of power in favor of the Sunnis, and non-Muslims in Lebanon have the same fear, with the Syrian refugees in Lebanon tip the balance of power in favor of the Sunnis at the expense of the others. So that's the two challenges that we have to figure out how to deal with them. But it takes leadership. And if the Syrians are able, and I think they are able, to put their differences aside and have a transformation from dictatorship to some sort of democracy where people are integrated democratically, that it's possible. But the biggest challenge, number 3, for me, is the building of institutions. All the institutions that are in Syria now are still using the same methodologies as the old regime. How can we turn them into more inclusive institutions or build new institutions? Thank you very much.
Jazakallah khair. Let me inshallah conclude before we start the question and answer and comment section. Uh, Sham is very important strategically to the West because to divide the Muslim world, Sham area is the one that connects the African side of the Muslim world, Egypt, Sudan, Libya, Tunisia, and beyond, to the Asian part, Iraq, Iran, Turkey. Sham area is this strategic location. That's why the kuffar were very careful in giving Lebanon to the Maronite Christians and giving Syria to the Alawites kuffar and giving Palestine to the Zionists. And of course, the rest of you know that Jordan was and is still a base for kufr in the area. They are the ones who gave Palestine without a fight. That's the reason why Syria last week, before last week, Syria had 6 armies on its land. Can you name a country in the world that have 6 armies on its land? There was the American army in the northeast. There's the Russians in the northwest. There was the Israelis in the south. The Turkish army in the north. The Iranian army in different places. And then the 6th army is the Syrian army, which is now disbanded. I'm not counting even Hezbollah and some of the Iraqi militias. What country have 6 armies in it? Think about it, and then you will realize why Syria is strategically important and why the points that the 2 brothers mentioned are at stake in how to build this new entity. Inshallah, time for comments, questions, and answer, and the floor is open for all, inshallah. Yeah, تفضل. Yeah, Brother Maj is asking about the future of the economic movement in the area. Are they going to be limited only to deal with the borders through Turkey and Jordan, since the southern border with the Zionists is not an option, or are they going to use the the Mediterranean to get things in and out? Of course, Iraq is still also another option. So you want to take it? Go ahead.
Thank you. So these things are still under development. However, the Chamber of Commerce in Syria is promising the businessmen and those who are concerned in Syria of a free market. However, they would try to structure a 30% tariff on foreign imports to protect the domestic products. So things that there are kind of a domestic equivalent to it would be importing them would be a little bit costlier than having them domestically. Trade has been open since the day one from Turkey, and Turkish products are there. Syria right now are dealing with Turkish lira, dollar, and Syrian lira, Syrian pound as well. Syrian pound and Turkish lira, however, along with US dollar, also fuel and all of these things have been they are selling it using all these currencies. So even the boards will be open and everything. So I have seen some of the decisions and the promises that are coming from the central bank and the Chamber of Commerce. However, it would take at least 3 months for these to materialize. They are giving some wafers right now for for a couple of months. There is one thing to note that the previous regime did not leave anything in the Syrian central bank other than the Syrian lira, no gold, no foreign currencies. So I hope I answered you.
Yeah, the money was stolen basically by the Syrian regime in this regard. In fact, today I checked $1 is worth how many Syrian liras? 13,000 liras. So if you have $1,000, if you go to Syria with $1,000, you are a Syrian millionaire. You have 13 million. That's the reality of what Assad have left behind. Go ahead.
Sorry, just to note, the Syrian lira before 80s was almost maybe closer to $1. And it started collapsing until like it came to be around $4. Then it collapsed until $50. Then with this last revolution, it came to be in that like over the tens of thousands. So we have been going from like in a free fall throughout the regime period.
So you can imagine if you want to go and have a haircut, you need to take a bag full of liras to have a haircut. Imagine if you want to buy a cow or a lamb. Any question or comment? Yes, Muhammad. Question or comment? Oh, okay. The comment will give you the mic. Yes. So that's the incentive. Professor Khudr, when do we expect the Israelis to stop the bombing in Syria?
Jazakallah khair for the question. Well, the Israelis will never ever stop bombing. It's part of their nature, part of their command and control. This is their theology. The only time the Israelis will stop fighting if there is a counterweight to their offensive weaponry. So if you could shoot down 10, 20, 30 planes, Israeli planes, that's when the Israelis will begin to negotiate. We have seen that after 1973 war, when Egypt and Syria has really won that war. Israel decided to seek peace secretly with the United Nations, the United States, and the Soviet Union. So until the other side, the Syrian side or Arab side, are able to really defeat on the battlefield the Israeli military, that's the only time Israel will stop. For the second question about the northeast of Syria, that's mainly controlled by the Kurds. And the Kurds are really allies of the United States. But the United States now kind of have left them alone for a second because they want to create a country out of four countries: Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. That's an unlikely scenario. But they have to be included in the new formation of a Syrian state.
Just the background, when the British fought the Ottomans, they did promise the Kurds a state of their own. And we have to admit that the Kurds have suffered just like the people of Palestine. The Kurds live in Syria, Iraq, Iran, and more than 20% of Turkey are Kurds. So basically the British use the Kurds and end up giving them nothing. But they still aspire to have an entity. And as Brother Khudr mentioned, the US will not go for it. Because basically, Turkey had an answer to the US when the ISIS was there. They said ISIS is a security threat for us. But the Kurds threat our own existence as a state. So that's why in the past 2 days, if you have noticed, brothers and sisters, some elements of Qasd, which is the Kurds, have said that they are in the process of opening dialogue with the government, in the new government in Damascus. So they are no longer saying we're gonna, slaughter and kill and this and this and that, and we'll have our own. No, they are talking, which really indicates that the U.S. is telling them, well, this situation of you controlling big chunk of northeast Syria would not last. So my own view is that the US is pushing them to be part of the whole, because as was said earlier, this would help the West in saying, look, Syria is not only Sunnis. Although when the Alawis controlled it for 54 years, there was little, the moment that the Sunnis start to have, a base in this regard, they'll say, well, there are the Kurds, and there are the Druze, and there are the Christians, and there are the Alawis, and there are this, and there are this. So suddenly, it's a mosaic that need to be taken into account. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect Syria and the people of Syria from all their conspiracies. Questions, comments? Yeah, sure, تفضل.
It's relevant, shukran. It's relevant. The only wild card, and they have been doing this since the 1960s, are the Israelis. That's why Saddam kind of invaded and occupied Kurdistan for a long time, because the Israelis were operating from northwest Syria and northern Iraq. So the Israelis remain the wild card. Whatever the U.S. does, that will undermine the U.S. The Israelis have always undermined the U.S.
Again, a little background. In Iraq, there were two major Kurdish parties and two major Kurdish clans, Barazani family and Talabani family. Labid al-Qadi can give you the background on this. But basically, Israel was supplying both of them with arms. Shah Iran was supplying both of them with arms to keep Iraq weak in the old days. So definitely we have heard some voices from the Druze in Syria calling upon Israel to annex part of Syria. We have heard some voices from of course, the leadership have really blasted them, their own leadership. Same thing with the Kurds. The Israelis are talking to the Kurds, and they are trying to have a base, future base with them in a way or another. Remember that when Iraq disintegrated and the Kurds have their own entity right now, it is a big base for the Israeli intelligence. No doubt about it. And we have some events that took place there that shows that the Israelis are deeply rooted in the Kurds area. And unfortunately, our descendants of Salah ad-Din and the Abtal, the Mujahideen who did what they did in Palestine, they are really looking for the Israelis to give them some rescue. Zaid. Yeah, the question is, we know that more than 90% of the Kurds are Sunni Muslims. And in Syria, there are different factions within Syria. The brother is asking, what is it that the HTS, Hayat Tahrir Sham, are doing in terms of trying to gain those people to their side or to the side of the state of Syria, and not to allow those, the US attempts and the Israeli attempts to keep using them as a tool in their hands.
Thank you. So,
welcome to you, inshallah.
So first of all, I would like to just make sure that when we speak about the Syrian leadership right now, we're speaking about a joint venture, a joint forces, a coalition that was formed by different parties. So Hayat Tahrir Sham along with other parties. Then the other point, yes, 90% of the Kurds are Sunnis, and this is why we distinguished between the secular Qasad that was armed by the United States and between the people of the Kurdi people in general. And not all the Kurds are in northeast Syria. Some of them are in the major cities, in Rukn-ud-Din, in Damascus, and all of these things. Basically, there is no issue dealing with those ascribed to being Sunnis. However, It seems what the current leadership is planning, that it's just making sure that the issue is with Qasad, that's trying to establish some kind of not independence or federation or something like autonomy. However, they are trying to negotiate with them better terms. But they also, at the same time, they are pushing them away from all Arab areas like Derzor, Raqqa, and all of the, like they will take them from all Arab areas that they used to control, and also from the suburb of the major cities like Aleppo and these things. It will remain, Qasad will remain there because it's armed by the US, it's protected by the US, and it is there to stay. However, that other Sunnis, even in their areas, are not armed and they have no power. So yes, they might stay with some control of Qasad for the current situation.
Professor Khadr.
Yes, a great question. Well, I think the Kurds are beginning to realize that the U.S. is not a reliable partner. In 2021, they left Afghanistan. 1975, they left South Vietnam. They left many countries behind after destruction, occupation. So in 2018, the Kurds in Iraq had a referendum to break away and have their own independent Kurdistan. But the U.S. under President Trump said, I don't think so. We cannot support it. He revoked that referendum that was passed by Kurdistan. So now the Kurds of Syria are beginning to realize that the U.S. is no longer a reliable partner. The best thing for us as Kurds is to be integrated into a new state.
In fact, all indications support what Professor Khadr is saying. Basically, the Kurds now have a choice. The US have advised them to be part of the whole. And there are indications for this. Otherwise, they would be taken in a different tone. So their choices are two. Either they will ally themselves with the Israelis and depends on the Israelis for weapons and for political support or for what have you. And the disadvantage in that regard, they are not on borders because the Kurds mostly are in the northeast and the Zionists are in the south. And that would be a political suicide. If they sell themselves to the Israelis, it would be a political suicide. The other choice, of course, is what was mentioned, to talk to the current government and see what sort of arrangement can be made so that they will have some of their rights. We need to really realize the reality. In Turkey, for many, many, many years, you cannot talk to your son in the Kurdish language. You cannot issue a pamphlet in Turkish. You cannot teach your family Kurdish language. You cannot have a Kurdish song. You cannot have in a wedding a Kurdish lyrics. I mean, this is during the time of the secular. When Erdogan came to power, Erdogan had a different view, but the seculars were very strong because they have their stand from the Kurds. Believe it or not, what really helped Erdogan in trying to improve the situation is that the European Union told Turkey, for us to consider you for membership, you need to give rights to the Kurds. And that's when Erdogan and the government then start allowing the Kurds to be member of parliament as Kurds, declared Kurds, having magazines in Kurdish language, newspaper, and this and this and that. This is only in the past 25 years or so. Before that, suppression, oppression was on the Kurds in Turkey from the secular forces, and that's what led somebody like Abdullah Öcalan to lead this revolt against the Turkish government when he was based in Syria. And when the Turkish government told Syria, stop, they did not stop. So Turkey put its soldiers and armament on the borders with Syria, this in the old days. And they said to al-Assad, either Abdullah Öcalan will leave or we will invade Syria. It was that serious. And of course, al-Assad was a coward, so he kicked Abdullah Öcalan out, and he went to Kenya, where the Turkish intelligence picked him up, and he is in jail in Turkey in the past so many years. Abdullah Ojlan, Google him and see the whole story. We have time for one more question or comment, inshallah. Yes, Ahmed. Okay, the question is that how much the U.S. is meddling in the affairs of Syria currently, and will they allow the current leadership to try to manage the situation in Syria, and to what extent they can influence and derail their efforts? Professor Khodr?
Yeah, I think as long as Turkey and the U.S. are talking and negotiating, we expect stability with Syrian having hegemonic power in the region instead of Iran. The idea is to push Iran back, roll back Iran, and bring Syria into the picture in more political, military way, and to, of course, bring back the 5-6 million Syrians back from Turkey to Syria. So as long as the U.S. Current administration and Trump administration next month, if that's the message they want to send, Turkey has to be part of this discussion.
So basically, Turkey is carrying the biggest weight in where things will go in Syria. And will not be just trivial for the U.S. to have its own ways, because Turkey, again, considered Syria, as we discussed earlier, a very important aspect of its own security in this regard. Do the sisters have a question or a comment? Okay, then, oh, there's one sister. Yes. What kind of state? Oh, a republic. How do you see Syria going into a future regime? What it looks like?
Honestly, it's not clear. However, what I believe that Syria would have a new army formed out of the coalition that made the operation, Rad al-Udwan. That's kind of like if things were has been going on forth with this, you have an army that is part of the people and it's protecting its people and it belongs to the people. Then it can protect whatever framework is that's there. Whether Syria is to stay a republic, I don't think this was questioned. Nobody has, like, as far as I know, nobody is questioning changing Syria from a republic to something else. But the issue is that once the parties are decided, how they sit together, how they would share power, how they manage their affairs, then we will figure out the constitutions, how much we can have a say as Syrian people in that constitution. And this is really concerning. Barakallahu fikum.
جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيك إن شاء الله. 1 minute inshallah, because the regulation, the security here want us to be out by 9 o'clock inshallah. So we already 3 minutes. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Dr. Khodr, go ahead.
There is a big debate in Syria what to call, not what kind of system to have, but what kind of name should Syria have? Should it be the Syrian Arab Republic or the Syrian Republic? Number two, we left things kind of not finished earlier when we talked about the Druze were welcoming the Israelis to take a part of Syria. Well, because most of the Israeli army soldiers, foot soldiers, are Druze, and they have that protection. And number three, the last thing I want to close with, it was Syria that liberated Palestine in 1187. Thank you very much.
And that's why the Israelis are saying in their media that we have it secured with Syria, but it's unpredictable, and that's where the uncertainty comes, and the Zionists do not like uncertainty. Jazakumullah khair all, and for the panel, and hopefully, inshallah, we'll have a better situation in the next few weeks, and we will have another session, inshallah. And forgive us, the rest of the brothers and sisters who have questions. We need to evacuate the masjid on time for the security, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.